Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second episode of Tangents, or as Barack Obama would say, a podcast with a nervous, unformed quality to it. The last episode probably had some bad audio, but that's one way to look at it. We probably gave you bad audio, but we could say that we were going for the gritty realism of Lars von Trier and the Italian neorealists of the 1940s and 50s. So we might say that we did not give you bad audio. We gave you neorealist audio.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, we have. So it's us. It's us again. It's Vikas and Chanakya.
Mhm.
Uh, so we have a special topic to discuss today. We'll begin by talking about the Chanakya of America. Vikas has been doing some very neat digging, and he'll tell us a lot about Steve Bannon, I believe.
Yes.
And then we'll try to connect that to a larger discussion of the rise of the global right and possibilities of having a more humanitarian right wing in India with new figures like Sanjay Raut and other parties. Essentially, can we have a right wing in India which is not genocidal and represents everybody, is more inclusive, whilst having its own right wing agenda? So, a right wing which is not affiliated with the RSS. So, what's the future of the right wing in India? And this specific topic is related to the rise of the global right. So we'll just talk about the nature of the right wing. We this episode is an attempt to explore right wing. So Vikas, take it away.
Thank you, Chanakya. We'll talk about the real Chanakya, the Chanakya of America, as you put it rightly. So, yeah, since you know that my research area entails post-truth, and I am working closely with post-truth and populism. And the moment I utter the word populism, I cannot help but bring in the name of Steve Bannon because I feel he is the emblematic, emblematic with the word populism.
Mm.
People always say that Donald Trump is a populist figure, but I say no. He is just the projection, the origin of the populism. Today's modern populism. He so far has been crafted and polished to the finer extent by the Steve Bannon. And I find him very intriguing figure because he has been around the picture for I think before the 2008 financial crash. We just missed his figure. He was there, always there. He was making his appearance here and there. He was making film. He made two or three films, feature films. They're boring. They're contrived. Don't watch it anyway. But yeah, he's making noise. And when I
Is it a bit like Ram Rahim,
was
MSG?
was in Ram Rahim, inconsistent, too much sound. Yeah, I mean, he has ideas, big ideas, but he doesn't know how to weave weave a particular or enthralling narrative. He doesn't know. Like he has big ideas. He makes sounds here and there, but to make a feature film, to documentary film, I don't think he has that capability. If you watch it, you'll understand that it's not worth watching. You'll have a
Just to
headache.
interrupt you, since you mentioned Steve Bannon creating feature films and documentaries, I recently discovered that there's actually a
Hmm.
more religion friendly version of Netflix, basically a Catholic Netflix called Pure Flix.
What flick?
Pure Flix.
Your flicks? Are you kidding?
Yeah, and they have movies. So the producer of Pure Flix also there acts in most of the movies. So there are movies like God is Not Dead.
Is it a Catholic way to regain the trust of the public by making them watch films?
I don't know, but this is something very weird, but interesting that I discovered that in a movie podcast.
Hey, yeah, I just open up their website and yeah, I can watch it. Like they are saying that have faith in entertainment, creating and producing faith-oriented, family-friendly entertainment that changes life, inspire hearts, and lifts the spirit of a viewer like you and those you love. Okay.
Yeah, but most of the films have very contrived and
Mhm.
stereotypical depictions, as you'd expect
Mhm.
of all the usual suspects.
Mhm. Smart packaging. They're trying to
Right.
become relevant again.
And so, what are the main features that have appealed to you when you were researching Steve Bannon? What are some of the main ideas that we need to focus on?
So one idea that I found that sharply resonates with him and that find a way through in all of his policies that have he has influenced on during his stay in the White House and in making of Donald Trump. So Steve Bannon sees the world in a multipolar vision. So he is clearly in a way uh, suggesting that we should not have multilateral or global institutions. We should leave institution on its own. We should not have institution like UN. We should not have institution like WHO, because they always tends to favor their policies one country or to the other, and in most cases they always do not favor United States. So in his worldview, it is always the fight between the Islam, who is an expansionist power, and he's trying to revive the good old Catholic European values, and he's trying to bring it in the US and trying to wedge a fight between Christians and Islam. So
Hasn't that been the case ever since the Cold War ended? Hasn't Christianity been expansionist ever since the Crusades?
no, but
And after the Cold War ended, the Cold War just turned into war on terror, right?
yeah, but I'll point you out that right now we need the nuances. Like after the end of the Cold War, it was always the fight between choosing one way of organizing government, that is communism, or choosing another form of organizing your government, that is uh, capitalism, where market decides which policies need to be favored and which policy need to be scrapped. It was never a fight between good old Christian values or Islam. It is only after the during the peak years of globalization, that is around 2008, because I feel that is a watershed moment in world history, not because financial crashes happened. Yes, it happened, but there are other reasons, because around that time we understood that we as the world communities were actually fragile, and we needed a repercussion. We needed an event like 2008 crash to make that splinter happen. We understood for the first time that we are all walking on eggshells. We just need a little bit push to go crazy. So in that way, in that context, I understood that Steve Bannon was actually waiting for those moments to make his to make his commencement look more relevant. Because he's saying that it's always been a fight between good old Christian values and Islam. It was never a fight between capitalism or mm, communism. Although he says that globalization to large extent has been detrimental to the you know rural populations of US. It has always tried to uh, get it way into the traditional US politics. It's tried to replace workforce. It tries to create a cosmopolitan culture, which is clearly against. So Stephen is a interesting figure. He goes around other European countries to bring a right-wing coalition, like in Italy, in Hungary, in Poland, in Germany. He's trying to create a right-wing coalition where he's the father figure. Although he
Yeah.
always says that I am not the one who is inspiring, I'm just merely helping them to shape their ideas. But he's clearly in that front. Yeah.
So going by what you're saying about Steve Bannon, if we are to take his historicization of the world as being a fight between Christianity and Islam,
Mhm,
wouldn't it be a better idea to say that instead of seeing that it began after the Cold War, would it be better to say that Cold War was simply a suspension of that binary? Because before the Cold War, we've had battles between Muslims who were called Saracens, I believe,
mhm, mhm. Yes.
in the medieval ages,
Mhm,
and Christians. The whole battle over Jerusalem,
mhm,
which was also depicted in a revisionist way in Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven.
mhm. So,
So could we say that while 9/11
mhm,
resulted in internationalizing, not resulting in internationalizing, but 9/11 was the event that gave the establishment permission to revive the binary between Islam and Christianity outside America, like on a more international scale. And we get to experience that through during air travel, because air travel has become more stressful post 9/11,
so,
while the 2008 crash
uh,
has resulted in infighting, where the democratic countries have become more polarized, specifically America.
okay. So I'll first get to 9/11. So you need to understand after the event of 9/11, uh, the US presidents always maintain that they always maintain that they're not fighting within Islam, they're fighting in bad Islamist style. They said that Islam is a religion of peace, and they said it categorically. You can go on record and check that.
Yeah,
Uh,
Bush
exactly,
said that we're not against Islam.
exactly, and they
We're
said it
against the
categorically.
fundamentalists.
They categorically said that they are not fighting Islam; they're fighting into bad apples in the basket. Islam is mostly a religion of peace. But when
Mm,
you listen to Steve Bannon, he says that Islam is strongly incompatible with the idea of democracy, especially with American democracy. So, bringing in Islamist guy or allowing them to foster on the earth is a dangerous thing, because now or then they will always attack our mainland. So, we need to go out first and demolish them, because Islam is not a religion of peace; it's a martial religion, just like Sikhism. They originated for a special purpose, on a special circumstances, to defend the land. And these people, Stephen, believe that they are not meant to be socialized in the American or European values, because no matter how many years they take to naturalize themselves in the American or European culture, they will never be able to mm, shade their previous
mm,
shells or previous skin and get into the American skin. It's just not possible, because their religion, it's so fundamentally attached to their idea of soul and how they organize themselves in the context of society, that is nearly impossible for them to reimagine themselves in American life. So we believe that we are not asking for a compromise, because that's not possible, because that religion is too violent. It's a martial religion. So we need to go out and get those bad guys and make the migration on those countries stop, plain and simple. Because he is clearly seeing the world in a bipolar manner, where they're saying that there is one religion who is expansionist, who is trying to destabilize the region, and there is America who is, who is involved in all these fights in Middle East and across the globe, where the national interests are not clearly. So let's just get ourselves out of this all this war zone, where we have nothing to gain except we are losing money and our soldiers. Let's just get out of there, and let's world figure out what they need to do. Meanwhile, we'll stop all the immigrations from those Islamic countries, and we'll cultivate our own human resource, that is American human resource. He is strictly against cosmopolitan. He is not even asking for legal immigration. He's saying that you need to also stop the legal immigration. We have enough good people who can do the job. We just need to stop it, because any number of legal immigration that is happening, they're also stealing a job from the American people. So we need to stop all kind of immigration, both legal and illegal, whatever it may be, and we can develop our indigenous human resource, because all immigrations will actually bring people who will eventually be incompatible with American values, because they are in certain ways and always remain un-American. So why we need to rely on them on the first place? The third, and I think that's the most important thing that I find within him, is that when he says that uh, the rise of populist culture has actually vanquished the space for liberal ideas or the center. And what he's saying, that now for next at least 20 or 30 years, people need to choose either Donald Trump, that is the right wing populism, or people need to choose from left wing populism, that is the Bernie Sanders. You don't have any space whatsoever on the middle, on the center. Space for liberal politics is over. There is no time for it, because people are frustrated with the democratic setup. So then they are electing guys. You can see that pattern in every country where there is writing populist leader, that people are choosing the guy who can get their job done no matter how. If they had to bulldoze the parliament, if they need to bulldoze the Supreme Court, that's fine. Just get the thing done. Just take the decision, because people are so fed up with the policy paralysis. People are so fed up with the current setup where they are they are seeing that their income is dwindling. They are not getting their things done. They are not seeing their voice uh, you know get their voice represented. They want people who will get things done. They will say, they will do no matter what, no matter, there is no restriction. So they are in the favor of people who want to take decision even if it's the wrong decision. So you see the bugs in our country who said that yes, Narendra Modi made the most stupid decision by bringing in demonetization or hastening the process of GST, but that guy bloody took the decision. So you see the frustration that has been built up, has been built up within the people for last 10 or 15 years, and that's what cashing in for this right is the rise of right wing populism. That's what Steve Bannon is pointing out, that there is no space for liberal politics, because people are now going back to the more traditional way of life. And hence you need to understand that Bannon, when he was early on in his life, was brought up in an Irish Catholic family where he was reading the work of René Guénon, an early 20th century French occultist and metaphysician, who was raised in a Roman Catholic family, who believed in traditionalism in religion and philosophy. And those traditionalism means an anti-modernism with precise connotations, where you believe certain religious ancient cultures, including Hindu Vedanta, Sufism, medieval Catholicism, where they were the repositories of common spiritual truth and revealed to mankind in earliest age of the world, that were wiped out by the rise of secular modernity in the West. So Steve Bannon is against that rise. That since the rise of liberal secular modernity, the trust on the institution have declined. People do not trust anymore on the institutions like church, bank, or the or any institution that
Hmm.
earlier had uh, helped them to grow themselves in society. So that had led to decline of public truths, the common public truths that people earlier believed in. So he's trying to re-energize that movement where people believed in simple, common spiritual truth that were always has been consistent with different generations. So his larger idea is to revive our traditional society with traditional form of economy.
Yeah, so just to add to the issue of failure of the center or failure of liberal politics or
Mhm,
people losing faith in liberal politics,
mhm,
I think that this also has to do with how the left became hypocritical around the 90s and leading to the Obamaification, so to speak, of politics in the 2000s, where post Cold War, the left stopped the socialist project of equality and bringing empowerment to the marginalized groups. So whichever groups we could think of, like it could be empowerment of women, empowerment of indigenous people or Adivasis, and basic social upliftment of those who have been in deprivation. So the left became more Clintonian with the rise of Bill Clinton, and this is something that Noam Chomsky was also talking about, where there's a schism in the Democratic Party in the U.S., where on one side you've got the popular left project represented by Bernie Sanders and AOC, uh, Ocasio Cortez, and on the other side you've got the donor dependent Clintonians, um, where we've got all the big banks supporting people like Hillary Clinton and Obama, and well, let's be honest, Joe Biden. So there's this camp, and for him, this latter camp, which is more centrist, is basically a form of moderate republicanism. They're not left for Chomsky, and and the overarching view of this, the overarching explanation of this is that the left abandoned socialism for neoliberalism. They started mixing public with private. And we saw, and in India, that's referred to as Manmohanomics with the 90s. Now, good things have happened in certain sectors, definitely. In India, if you think of the 90s and the whole talk about India being close to becoming a superpower, and it began with neoliberalism in India. But that while that did benefit the middle class and the working professional, it left out people. And there are plenty of and hence you have symptoms like the Trumpists, or even a film like Hell or High Water, where this film explores this particular class of people
In Rust
who
Belt.
are who are outsiders, who've become outcasts because they're outcasts of this economic project of neoliberalism,
Mhm,
and hence the center cannot hold.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And if you think of the other point that you mentioned Bannon making, which is basically tribalism. Now,
mhm,
uh, that is connected to one of the central tenets of right wing politics. Now, if you think of the history of right wing, it's from from the days of the French Revolution, where
exactly.
people who are pro establishment would sit on the right side of the king, right?
Yes, that's how
Or people,
Parliament used to organize in British
yes.
Parliament also.
So that's the right wing. So
Mhm,
the right wing is pro religion and pro hierarchy because they believe in the establishment that there is there is an assumed natural hierarchy in society. Like there is some element of inequality that is natural. And to this, a lot of modern commentators refer to the animal kingdom. Like Jordan Peterson talks about lobsters,
mhm,
and primal urges and biology. People talk about biology when they say that women are less likely to hold positions of power, which might be true to some extent. I'm not a biologist,
mhm,
so empirically that might be true. But the point I'm trying to make is that right wing commentators and politicians refer to hierarchy and biology and primal urges, and by extension, asking to return to this older way of living where we would live in small communities. As Bannon's talking about, where he's basically talking about isolationism.
mhm,
Um, so a reference to the primal urges is completely oppositional to to the Enlightenment Project, which they also seem to be supporting, which they seem to be representing in America, that we are the enlightened people, and there are these outsiders who will never be like us. So you can't have both, right? You can either be tribalistic and go around with that, or you're enlightened, but you can't have both. So this, don't you think that there's this particular paradox
Yes,
in Bannon and his ilk?
yes, obvious. It is paradox. There is obvious this paradox that's operating in the entire worldview. But there's one thing that that I was always wondering when I was reading about this and listening to the interview, hours of interviewing, reading what he thinks, how he thinks. So one thing that I found, since you're talking about the paradox, is that why people started to think in this way, because you need to understand that before globalization, our economy was far our economy was fairly reliant on people who were jack of all trades. I don't know if you're getting what I'm trying to say. So
Mm.
what happened is, after globalization, is that you had more intense division of labor happening. So you have people, specialist people for each and every individual area. So the division of labor happened at most intense level during globalization, because there was no restriction to movement of goods and people. So people, that was happening. And what happened is that people of older generation, like the ones of, like, our parents, failed to scale up to match that scale, and they were left behind, and they could not uh, take the benefits out of the globalization, and they started sulking. And since they started sulking and they were not quite represented in the
So
liberal.
you're talking about the baby boomer generation around the 50s and 60s?
Yes, because
Okay.
yeah. And what happened is that since they were not quite represented in the media and the decision making bodies, what happened is that they started losing faith in all the institutions that were supposed to represent, no matter how underrepresented they were in on those platforms. So what happened is that the common public truths that they actually believed in while they were growing up collapsed. And since they were slowly being pushed out the margin, they started telling themselves stories as to why they were being pushed out, not the original one that they failed to scale up. I'm not being condescending while I'm talking about this. I'm just putting out the plain fact.
Hmm.
They started themselves telling stories. That's why conspiracy theory has been very popular with right-wing people, because they are the one who has, they think they always has been pushed to the margin. So they have been telling these stories, that why they have been pushed, why the people at the top are corrupt, why the people at the top are morally corrupt. They do not have the moral right to lead them, leave out the fact that they are incompetent. So they started telling themselves stories that why they have been marginalized, and they started believing in smaller truths. And since the postmodernism always has already said that there is no grand narratives, there are always these small narratives, it made things more easy. Since you have smaller truths to believe in, you don't need bigger truths that unite us. And hence things started fractured, starting splintering in more diverse way. And this is what I fear, that we are moving into a time where we have personalized truth in a manner where we can't even agree whether eating spaghetti or noodles.
And this is also exacerbated by new media,
Yeah,
because
yeah, and
we also have personalized taste now. If you think of, say, the 80s, and yeah, say if you think of 80s, you've got blockbusters, and everybody would be talking about blockbusters. And now we have things like Marvel and DC
mhm.
and Game of Thrones.
can I can I inter-
Um,
can I interrupt a little bit?
yeah.
So when you get into this frustrating state, it's very obvious that people like Stephen Rice, who will sound appealing, because I personally want a more public form, a common form of truth. And in that way, Steve Bannon is trying to provide you that way out, that platform where you can access that public truth, that common truth that you're talking about. So you will see that Trump supporters or right wing supporters, they mostly agree on the topics they talk about, because these are the truth they are accessing on daily basis. There is no disagreement about it. So this is what, this is quite reassuring that yes, there's some form of similitude, or very similitude, that is left from the time when they're growing up. They're trying to bring that old fashioned good old days where there were stable institutions, there were stable jobs, there were stable economy. There was one religion, used to go on Sunday for the mass. You had,
Community,
yeah, community
sense of
thing.
community.
Exactly. You used to have a 8 hour shift. You used to come back to watch news. You have simple pleasures. The economy was not diversified. The public opinion wasn't so intense, so vitriolic. They're It's a call to return back to the nature, but in a crooked way. I believe that it's good
Yeah.
that they're trying to go back to return, but crooked.
Yeah, I just mentioned Game of Thrones and blockbusters because it's really the last uh, instance of experiencing a cultural moment, because a lot of people
Harry
were
Potter.
disappointed with when these movies are released, or these Marvel movies are released, or
Mm-hmm.
when a lot of people around the world are disappointed by season 8 of Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
It's really it's really at the fag end of this culture of this phenomenon of cultural experience. We will not be having events as a cultural experience going forward, because as you mentioned, we've become more individualized.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the idea of a cultural experience happened or became popular during the 50s and 60s, or what basically post World War II, where we had this economy boom, what Frederick Jameson calls late capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
The generation, like the period the baby boom generation belongs to.
Mm-hmm.
And now, what, like going by what you're saying, the way you're describing Bannon,
Mm-hmm.
the baby boom generation had faith in the system, they worked hard, and they had this nostalgic idea of a utopia that would come as a
Mm-hmm.
result of working hard. And hence, when they eventually arrived at in the 21st century, and finally in the 2000s, they realized that they did not get their due, and hence they, instead of becoming nostalgic or looking towards the future, they became nostalgic.
Mm-hmm.
let's
Exactly.
bring let's bring back a past which
Mm-hmm.
didn't really exist but kind of did.
It
But yeah,
existed, but not in the fashion they're trying to bring it back now.
right. So they're trying to, are they trying to bring back the 60s, or are they trying to bring back are they trying to bring back a more mythic version of what they think the 60s represented, which is peaceful, communal, harmonious living, which is informed by religion and other forms of community.
Yeah. So at the core of all this return that I'm talking about, at the core of all this is this togetherness, this access to common truth, access to common public service, access to stable life that they're trying to talk about. And the fact that religion played a major role in putting a glue to this community is what is interesting to me, because since that economic crash, or since the globalization, the idea of faith in a god, in a supreme god, or in idea of church has been
Hmm.
diluted. Now you have more non-believers, you have atheists, but you have less believers, and that has led to the dilution of the idea of family or community, the togetherness. Now people agree on issues, not on faith. So I agree with you on some issues and not on others. We don't have similar faith, or we don't have similar outlook to life. So this has dwindled the faith, this has dwindled the ability to gel together as a community, and that has led to more fractured that led to more fault lines in the society. That's something that we as a society cannot cope up, because at the end of the day, if we are to imagine ourselves as a nation, we need to stay together, not stay alive as a fractured community. That's not possible. And I believe that uh, the more the fault lines get visible, more there is chance that we splinter, more splinter. And since there's another thing that Steve Bannon is talking about, that is detest for the rise of identity-based politics, especially in American colleges. Hence, you will find that Trump supporters are distant, they are skeptical, and they hate people who go to higher education. Hence this hatred for the specialists or experts, because they do not trust them. They do not trust their intention, leave alone their education.
Also, in America, it's easier to buy your way into a top university.
Ironically, the old Republican, they all rich, they all went to the Ivy League university, where the tuition fee is way more than your father's income or my father's income. It is way
Yeah,
more than you can imagine. The good old Republicans are all educated in Ivy League, and they are the one who are rallying around the cry that we should not send our kids to higher education. It doesn't do any good. It just takes the money off you. It doesn't do anything. It makes your children liberal, which is dis- absolutely distasteful. It don't need to be. And now this hatred for higher education has been spread to the both sides of the aisle. Now you'll find Democrats who are skeptical of higher education, the need of higher education, and the idea of individuals like expert who need to be there on the panel for public policy. They don't believe on the existence of experts. They absolutely detest the idea of experts on any panel. They do not trust their intentions. So these
right.
are all related. These are all related. They're all macrocosmic, but once you trace back the origin, they're all microcosmic. That's what's interesting to me, that these are all traced back to the idea of community, and anything that uh, deter to the deter the peace of inside the community is always shunned, is always been put outside and seen as foreign.
Yeah. Is it possible to think of the differences between right wing and center and left as we have today in terms of philosophy, for example, the difference between the idealists and the empiricists? If you think of the idealists, they think of the world theoretically through a priori truth. So for them, there is this past abstract, however abstract, there is this past which has existed, which has given order to the life that we're living in the present. Whereas people who are more liberal and more towards the left seem to be empiricists. For example, atheists,
Mm-hmm.
people who are liberal and left inclined are more. It's they're more likely to have more unorthodox forms of relationship, like open marriage, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe even like they're staying long term. They may have be monogamous, but they might not choose to marry, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So are we going back to the philosophical debate of idealism and empiricism, where one group is looking towards the past and one group is looking towards the future? The one
Yes.
group is basing their experience on text, religious text, for example,
Uh-huh.
and the other group is basing their experience on lived reality.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you brought this perspective, because I was myself was planning to bring this other way of reading it through it, because it again boils down to the fact that the idea of what I call good hermeneutic principles, like uh, this is something that I've realized right now, that I've been taught mostly in my life in Indian education system, where uh, our teachers has mostly led the charge of paraphrasing or making meaning out to us. They never relied on us to make meaning out of it. So we were never given, we never taught the values of good hermeneutic principles. Like how should you interpret, and what are the key things that are non-negotiable while you are going to interpret anything, be it history, be it a prescription from a doctor, be it reading a love letter from your lover, be it
Hmm.
anything, listening to daily podcast, favorite podcast too. You're always engaging in hermeneutic principle, one way or other. But we are never in our life have been taught how to interpret things in good value, in good intentions. And at the end of the day, when you compare and contrast this idea of right wing populism and, as you said, the liberal one, it boils down to the fact that the one that the on the right, they are going back to the text where they're saying that, look, this is my text, this is what they have written, and I believe this. And the people on the left are saying that text, there is no text in the world. The entire world is a text, and I'm free to make meaning out of anything, because for me the word is connotative, and that the guy on the right is saying no, for me the word is denotative. For me, the god is orthodox, conservative, he's cruel, he 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 is jealous. And the guy on the left said that, look, for me, there is no God. And if at all there is God, I have a personalized relationship with my God. I imagine my God as I am in my personal life. So it again boils down to the hermeneutic principle that they have been taught in. And this always plays down or plays in your daily life, how you watch news, how you interpret in news, how you build your idea around the society, how you imagine yourself as a workforce, as a resourceful human being in the society. So I believe that that I was planning to write in my thesis, that one way of countering this
Don't disclose plans or your thesis, man.
it's fine, I don't mind, but there's one way of countering this rise of personalized truth, or the rise of many truths, that is post truth, is that coming out bringing in a curriculum in the schools from the early age, where we teach people how to engage in a hermeneutic principle that is done in good faith. So we can formulate three or four, five principles that are absolutely non-negotiable while you are reading anything or while you're interpreting anything, because they're never taught to how to make meaning out of anything. We are always served the meaning on the platter. Be it imagine, like, look, remember your history lessons in a school. We are never allowed to interpret history. They're always the facts or the interpretation always being served on the platter. In the civics class, in the history class, in the science class, in the maths class, we're never allowed to make meaning. We're never allowed to talk how to interpret meaning. And I think that is the core where we find that people are so divisive. They are so vitriolic at each other, because they're always fighting on a word that they see that they see different to each other. Like, people can't agree on a like I how would I
Right.
say?
So
Yeah.
in learning theory, there are terms like lecture driven classes, and lecture driven pedagogy and learner driven pedagogy. So that's basically again this distinction that we're discussing between the idealists and the empiricists, between
Mm-hmm.
the nostalgic people and the
Mm-hmm.
post-nostalgic people,
Mm-hmm.
or people who are dependent on current lived experience. So can't we again boil the idea of the idealism of the right and the empiricism of liberal and left to, if we think of a textual equivalent of this, it
Mm-hmm.
would probably be the Bible
Mm-hmm.
or any other or the other religious text
Mm-hmm.
and the constitution of a nation,
Yeah. Mm. Mm-hmm.
because the
Yeah, I agree.
constitution is something that you and I are writing for
Mm-hmm.
our nation, and the Bible
Mm-hmm.
is given to us.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think this is the most visual representation of my argument, and thank you for bringing in that. But there's one thing that I want to re-emphasize, is that since we don't have a good hermeneutic principle in place, we can't even agree on the connotation of words like secular. So if I asked a right winger, that what do you mean by secularism, or what do you mean by secular, when I say that we have a secularism inscribed in our preamble, in constitution, His idea of secularism is that the majority will decide how faith will play out in the public life. But when you ask a left winger or centrist person that how do you think this secularism, which is inscribed in the constitution, play out, he will say that in your public life you has to completely stay. You can't display your faith, or you can't wear your faith on your sleeves. But on your private life, you can always practice your faith. Or alternatively, you cannot use your faith to frame public policy that will affect a large number of people who do not subscribe to your faith. So you have to always not necessarily hide your faith, but you should not bring your faith while deciding on a public policy. So we can't even agree on the on a word that is inscribed in secularism, because we don't our realities, what I call intersubject reality, is so different. We imagine, we dream similar thing in different fashions, and that's what is dividing our country, our world, everything. Our intersubject reality is at the core of our decision making, our practice of interpretation.
Yeah, when you think of interpretation, like, plenty of thinkers have had things to say about how we interpret and how our interpretation is a product of the historical context that we belong to. Michel Foucault uses a term called episteme.
Yes, yes.
So uh, the way we now we can even think of episteme in for a period of maybe 20 years. So let's take the word secularism that is very live in the context of our country. Now, if you think of the 2000s, late 90s, 2000s, uh, pe- no matter what your political affiliation is, like even if you're part of the BJP, you would defend that word. For example, most of the Bollywood epic romances,
Like,
um, like think of Veer Zara and Border. Well, Veer Zara celebrates interfaith love, whereas Border, while being a war film, it is essentially anti-war. It's showing you the horrors of war. Now, if you think of all these films about interfaith romances like Veer Zara, uh, this is what Varun Grover in a roundtable discussion in Quint, I believe, refers to as constitution-friendly films.
nice
Now,
packaging.
yeah, it's a very cool term, constitution-friendly films. The thing is, it'll be difficult to make a constitution-friendly film post 2012 or maybe post 2014, like today. Like Veer Zara is one of the biggest films in Bollywood history. But if you think of a film like Kedarnath, that was uh, that received a backlash
Love
from
jihad.
the Love Jihad conspiracy theorists. So again, the episteme has changed. It's the same thing. It's the same word, but it's got a different context, different historical context. And we come to your topic of post-truth.
So, like, you're saying that if like even people on the right would agree on a similar definition of secularism, but right now they can't, right? That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and this also has relationships with how countries' Overton window develops over time. Um, I mean, for the most of you probably know what an Overton window is, but an Overton window is basically the left-right spectrum of a region at a given time. So, how left is the left wing of a country, or how right is the right wing of a country. So, for example, the left of India would probably be considered center right in a country like Canada or say in Scandinavia. And similarly, the right wing of Canada would probably be considered center or center left in India. And now, as we grew into the 2000s and finally in the 2010s, and by the time BJP formed the government, uh, more things that are far right were allowed into the Overton window of allowed into the Indian Overton window. Things like bogus things like love jihad,
Mm.
which would be scoffed at by both the left and right in back in the 2000s. I don't think there would be a lot of defenders of love jihad even in the Vajpayee era, or and in the 2000s when all of us would go to the theater and watch a film like Veer Zara. And so when we think about the right wing, so is there uh, do you think that there is a possibility for having a right wing which represents people? Because when I see leaders across the world, when someone like Trudeau or even Biden like show up and they say that I don't represent only my voters, I represent everybody.
Mm.
Um, can is it ever possible to have a right wing which a leader who might say that? I mean, the closest we come is Germany, where Angela Merkel is a very like the politics of Germany is very interesting because it's conservative Democrat. I don't really understand it, but it's really interesting in that it's. I think that's what they call themselves. I don't remember the exact
Mm.
name of the body, but they
Yeah.
have conservative values, but they're also progressive. So they have this mix. Um, so I'm not saying that the right wing or the German model can be replicated, but is it possible to have a right wing leader who is not genocidal? Because what I mean is, whenever a center left government is elected in, we see things like economic progress and we see leaders at least saying that they represent everybody. People like Macron, now Biden, Obama back in the day. But whenever we see a right wing leader, they make statements like those who are protesting can be identified by their clothes.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Uh, so they don't represent. So we have, is it possible to have a right wing that is humanitarian where they propagate their agenda, their beliefs, their policies, whilst also representing everybody and participating in the constitutional democratic process? Is that at all possible? Because whenever any right wing leader is elected, say in India or America, they seem to be pushing back against the constitution and the very foundations of a nation state. So is a humanitarian right wing possible? So think of leaders like Sanjay Raut.
Mm.
So it's very strange because back in the 90s they supported Shiv Sena supported the demolition of Babri Masjid.
They still do.
But yeah, exactly. So they say they're Hindutva, but they are against CAA. So it's a little confusing. So are they trying to be liberal yet?
No, I think
So
because
what's going on here?
yeah.
What's your take on this?
I'll just talk more currently about Shiv Sena. I believe that this is a classic strategic position they are trying to take. Like they want to posture themselves as a party that is liberal, but to keep up with their support base and their party worker who are mostly they're absolutely faithfully their right wing. So they're strategically repositioning themselves because they need to keep this alliance up because
Yeah, I'm not saying that you have to stop being right wing, but is it possible
no,
for
no, it's
a
not
right
possible.
wing to be to
No,
be
no,
humanitarian?
no, it's not possible because Sanjay Raut and Shiv Sena is playing to the gallery. They are not faithfully represented liberal values. They are right now playing the gallery because the same people will turn the tables when they need to align to BJP again. Don't forget that they still support the support the event of Babri Masjid demolition. They still say that Veer Savarkar need to get a Bharat Ratna. These are still issues that need to be cleared before they can surely say that, look, we are liberal. We just support Hindu tradition. That's different thing. Supporting Hindu tradition is different thing. But imagining the country in the entire country in Hindu tradition is a whole lot different ball game, and that strategically position yourself with how BJP has been positioning themselves since 2014. So right now they're
So we
playing
get
balance.
back to we get back to Steve Bannon's point.
Yeah. So currently, uh, don't think that since Trump has lost Steve Bannon, we lose the momentum. Absolutely not, because the right wing has been gaining momentum all across Europe, and I believe that even though Biden presidency will bring the healing that he's asking for it, the US politics remain highly divided, because even in Republican camp, people have found that Trumpism is a way to get back to the voters, because they see Trumpism is an idea, is a political, is a tactical political strategy that can rile up your support base. Because otherwise, Republican politics has been boring before Trump. It was mostly boring. There are not many issues that Republicans were agreeing on always. So Trumpism is a way to rally up your support base, and they know that if they can rally it around successfully, they can always get the votes, because he has already got 72 million votes. That's a huge number. That's
Mm.
enough vote to win the politics. So they know that this is a winning formula. Just you need to use more craftily, more, more, more strategically. So this is not going around, and you'll see more of Steve Bannon, because his way of reasoning this his entire world is very appealing. It's like classic good versus evil. That the good is the Catholic values and faith, and the evil is the Islam. It's a very convenient way of positioning yourself on the victim side and trying to play around the gallery and asking that, please help us, because we want to get back to the old nostalgic phase where we have access to public truths. Please help us. So I don't think that is going around, and this will divide the public opinion even more violently, because earlier we used to see fights on Twitter, but now we are seeing fights on the street. There was an actual Trump guy who went to the pizza on a pizza delivery center and fired on the public. Thankfully, there was no the restaurant was empty, because he believed in a conspiracy theory which says that Clintons are carrying out a pedophilic sex racket.
QAnon, is it QAnon? Like
Yeah,
QAnon?
Pizzagate, the Pizzagate
Yeah,
controversy.
yeah.
So people are believing it, and now it's now more violent than ever. So it's not going away. As I said,
Right, right.
we need to be more vigilant than ever. Why we speak, how we speak, and what are the words that we're trying to use have impact, have impact on the people. I need to talk to people. We need to talk to our family members, acquaintance, and need to make them understand, make them cool down that uh,
Yeah, that's something which the Indian millennial generation is needs to be responsible for, because the older generation does not have a conception of fake news, because they used to get their newspapers in the morning and would read whatever's on Doordarshan, watch whatever's on the Doordarshan and read the newspaper and
see,
just
I can't.
go.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I can't help sharing this sharing this bit of sharing this joke. The other day, I was telling this to my friend that. Do you remember that episode in Mahabharat where Yudhishthir went to the god of camp and said that Ashwatthama Hato? Remember that episode?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so there was an episode that Ashwatthama, like I'm explaining it crudely. So there is one episode
Yeah,
that Ashwatthama was undefeatable in the battle. So Krishna found a way that if you go to the father Ashwatthama, I remember, I forgot his name. If you go to his father and he said that your son has died, he will broke down psychologically and it's easy to defeat him. But Yudhishthir said that no, I can't take part in something that is utterly false, because I am Yudhishthir. I am supposed to be the guy that who always tell the truth. So Krishna found a way that okay, you will say him that Ashwatthama has died, and then slowly, calmly, undertone, you'll say that, oh, it is not the Ashwatthama, the person, but the elephant. So in both way, you are managing the affair, right? Get the point?
Mm. Yeah.
So I jokingly said to my friend that Ashwatthama Mahato is the first fake news in the history of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it is the first fake news
Mm.
because that fake news helped Pandavs to win the war. So it works. It works. Fake news works.
Propaganda and the Mahabharata.
Yeah, it works. It works. And
Yeah.
uh, as I told you, because fake news always appeal to a part of your personality, they always want to believe in simple truths. Because
Yeah, because fake news is basically not compatible with the empirical view of the world, but
exactly,
it
which is
is actually
complex.
a constituent of the idealistic view of the world.
Exactly, because the real world is complex. The real world is nuanced, and what post truth is absolutely against is nuances. They are looking at world uh, at a like at a bird's eye view where you have simple truths like it's good versus evil, Trump versus Biden, it's radical left versus the good old Catholic right.
In Steve Jobs' biography, there's this term which Walt Isaacson uses, which Steve Jobs, I think, also used, is that he used a term called reality distortion field. It's a process by which you impose your reality onto your workers and just make them come up with all the crazy ideas that you're telling them to perform.
Wow.
Reality distortion field.
Okay.
So this is what basically the idealist does, and now the right wing does. Like they
Hmm.
have a narrative in their head. It's basically Pokemon Go, then, right? I mean, you're
Uh, Zizek.
like VR.
Yeah, yeah. It's a game. It's a game. It's a fun game that you're playing, engaging with a large number of supporters, and they are also playing into it. You see how Trump supporters or the Modi supporters playing to this game. They're believing everything they're talking about. They're talking about the ancient India who had solutions to everything, who were already progressive. It's just the Mughal and the British who have held them back.
Yeah, that's very convenient.
Yeah.
Now, since you mentioned the aspect of riling up supporters,
Mhm, mhm,
um, you have mentioned that the right wing is hyper masculine, and
mhm,
in that, if
mhm,
we think of the prefix hyper
mhm,
in the strict Baudrillardian sense of
mhm,
hyper reality,
mhm,
like let's look at the term hyper reality. Hyper reality is basically a concealment of an absence, in the sense that hyper reality hides the fact that there is no reality. So
mhm.
it's like there's a box and you think there's something inside the box, and you open the box and you see that it's empty, but this box itself is very attractive, and it's representing what you think is inside the box, but once you open the box you find it's empty. So without hyper, for Job Adria there is no reality, and
Mhm,
if you remove hyper reality there's nothing. So
mhm,
similarly, if you think of hyper masculinity,
mhm,
and like it makes sense to think of the gendered aspects of politics, because most of the right wing crowd in whether in the case of Trump or BJP, it's mostly male. If you just look around,
mhm,
and males are not like hyper masculinity. If you think of it in terms of hyper reality, hyper masculinity seems to hide the absence of masculinity,
mhm,
because if you think of these world leaders, they don't like they flaunt, like Modi flaunts the fact that he left his wife.
mhm,
So I have this like idea that I wanted to explore.
mhm.
Uh, does the right wing need to have more sex? No,
That
think
is
about it. Think about it.
preposterous.
think about it. The one quality of right wing politics around the world is bitterness, anger, basically neurosis. And now Sigmund Freud says that the biggest reason for neurosis is unconsummated excitation, unconsummated erotic excitation.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if you look at how right wing presents itself, like Narendra Modi said, he flaunts the fact that he left his wife to serve the people, and in generally speaking, they're not really progressive. They don't have progressive views towards women, as we see in Yogi Adityanath in Uttar Pradesh.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, if you think of like right wing leaders around the world, like Trump, the dynamic between Trump and Melania Trump, it's a little hilarious. Or Mike Pence refusing to attend any dinner or any meeting without his wife because
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
wants to flaunt
Evangelical
his
Christian.
exactly he wants to flaunt his fidelity, his
Mm-hmm.
Catholic fidelity. So
Mm-hmm.
it's no, it's not a question of being like having an individualized dynamic with one's wife. It's not a question of being loyal to one's wife as a husband. It's more about flaunting the Catholic identity of fidelity
Mm-hmm.
and hence desexualizing one's relationship.
Mm. It's a powerful formulation, I must say, because this is one way of looking into it, and
And
probably.
the most common factor that unites Modi and Putin and Trump and most of these like
Bolsonaro.
these strongman leaders is that their fans are mostly male.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you see the rallies, if you just take a quick look at any of the rally, Trump rally or a Modi rally, it's mostly male,
Yes.
and it's hyper masculine because they all love to flaunt their masculinity, which is not really masculine. Trump wants to grab a certain area of women. Modi talks about his 56-inch chest.
Yeah.
So it is about flaunting masculinity, or rather hypermasculinity, because once you remove the rhetoric of masculinity, you're left with nothing. There is no masculinity.
So,
And hence it's hypermasculinity, and hence this is my thesis that the
mm,
right wing needs to have more sex.
so
Because we just see leaders, if you think of the left wing leaders, they're pretty comfortable appearing in public with their partners, with their wives.
even
uh,
compared with their sexuality.
Macron, yeah, Macron shows up with his partner, who I think who was his teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the Obamas are always present together,
Biden.
whereas if you think of right wing leaders, it's
Mm.
just this one man.
Maybe
And
it's
also right wing, like
maybe it's
being
lonely at the
sorry to
top.
interrupt you.
Maybe it's lonely at the top for right wing people.
Yeah, it's just one man, and they use that as a source of strength.
Mm.
And and they're also, since the right wing is naturally inclined towards religion.
And celibacy.
uh, yes, they are inclined towards repression. So right wing politics and repression go hand in hand,
Mm.
and hence the right wing needs to have more sex.
Yes, yes.
And hence,
It's a
if they
remedial
have more
measure,
sex, the world would be a better place.
and maybe more populated. Who knows?
No, yeah, no. Maybe less populated, use protection, because if the other thing with right wing people is that if they have sex, they don't want it for pleasure, they want it to create a baby. So
Hashtag feminism.
yeah, hashtag feminism.
Little bit of Oliver.
Yeah, this is our
Internal joke.
yeah. No, not internal joke. People who watch John Oliver would get it. I haven't watched John Oliver in years, in a year maybe.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I don't watch him because there's no studio audience, so I miss the laughter. That's why I don't watch
Oh,
him
okay.
anymore. Yeah, but there's one thing that I want to bring in because you talk about the hyper reality. Because do you find that Baudrillard's hyper reality is different from Plato's cave? Because Plato is also talking about the same thing, that Plato cave demonstrate that how humans can see shadows of true substances and never the original form, which shows the how the nature representation does not correspond to the reality.
Yeah, but for Plato's cave, Plato talks about different levels of reality, right? Because before the you climb out of the cave, you have a sense of what reality is
Yes.
from what's available to you. But for Baudrillard, maybe there is a connection, but for Baudrillard, there is something that's not at all related to what's actually real. It's not a level. It's a replacement. It's a gimmick.
Mhm. So, like, I would like to emphasize the role of society a little bit more explicitly, because the hyper real is hyper real in the part because society has taken up prefigured something which once meant something too heavily. I feel like I am horseshoeing around. The mane- people on the wall chatter, and they chatter about the shadows, and amid themselves they talk about what was signified as real, and continue to interpret and focus on this limited signified of the real, until within which the society it becomes decoupled, unattached, and loses its significance as a society embroils the real into a hyper real level of discourse and topicality. So I believe that society has a role to play in this idea of hyper real and in the allegory of Plato's cave.
Yeah, because for if we come back to Bannon, the right wing wants to bring their idealized past into our lived experience. Like use that as a lens, and hence in India you have love jihad and everything else, whereas in America you have Proud Boys and white supremacists.
Yes.
So they are not really necessarily are concerned with reality. They are concerned with the lens. Like, even if you think of sexuality, they are concerned with how you're viewing them with their partners. Now they want to be viewed as a couple, which is consistent with the way religion views couples, but not as a relationship of sexual love and companionship, which a more liberal person uh, would assume when they see couples. So it's about that lens of viewing, where you're not really viewing.
Okay, okay, okay. So, do you think that, like, okay, it's an interesting take that how sexuality vis-a-vis religion play a part in trying to prefigure how right wing will weigh in their opinion on different issues. Because
Yeah,
on
and that's what hypermasculinity probably means in the context of right wing politics. Because, like, have you noticed the kind of people Trump chooses as his press secretary? They all, besides Huckabee Sanders, they all seem to be a bad copy of Ivanka Trump. Now, which is basically what you expect in a very Hugh Hefner-esque Playboy magazine like model, where everybody is this extreme blonde, like California, like stereotypical California, like teenage boy fantasy,
mm,
which you also find in the current press, the current person, what's her name, like Kaylee McEnany, yeah, her.
Conway.
No, Keelan Conway was before that, but
Okay, yeah,
Kaylee
okay.
McEnany is the one who's the
Okay,
White House
yeah,
press correspondent,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
who the acting White House
But just to
press correspondent.
just to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
see that
Keelan Conway is just Keelan Conway feels like a corpse of the current one.
Yeah,
Like if the current uh, White House press secretary stays in a coffin for a month, she'll turn into Kellen Conway.
but just to interrupt you, but you see that
Yeah.
yes, they are in favor of celebrity and repression, but you see how Trump flaunt his dalliance with women, how he objectify women, like same to Bolsonaro. He doesn't. I won't say he respect women, but he objectifies women and he celebrates their objectification. He flaunt it. He is proud that he doesn't respect women but sees them as sexual object that need to be devoured. That's also a part of right wing politics.
No, and this is hypermasculinity, right? I mean, it's a show.
Yeah,
It's a show which hides the fact that masculinity isn't there. So when we think of flaunting of uh, masculinity by Trump and others, the other side of the coin is rape in India, and how women are mistreated in most parts of India, and especially in some of the Hindutva states like Uttar Pradesh. Like women, like it's even worse. So attacking women is a form of, like, it's basically using your physical prowess to overpower women. So that's, again, it's just hyper masculinity.
yeah, it's just not just only repression, but you're also using your
No, it is
masculinity as a
repression. It
weapon.
is repression. Exactly. It is repression in the sense that you're not comfortable with masculinity as your sexual identity. You're using masculinity as a weapon for uh, the idealistic religious idea,
Mm-hmm.
which finally leads to patriarchy. Because I feel patriarchy is just a technique which tries to remove sex from relationships. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, quite fair. Go on.
Yeah, so it's just removing pleasure and sex from relationships. So you're not only desexualizing, or rather objectifying women, you're desexualizing the male, because, like Mike Pence, who has to bring his wife everywhere as this trophy, to show people that he's loyal. Um, Here, you're just, as a right wing person, you're just showing, you're desexualizing yourself as male. Like, you're a man,
Hmm.
but you're not a sexual being, or you're at least not comfortable with the idea of yourself as a sexual being. And that's the right wing idea of populism. Sorry, the right wing idea of masculinity. So when Modi has 56 inches,
Hmm.
so what?
Hmm.
So it's 56 inches would probably imply that, okay, great, he's strong, he's a strong guy, but like, so what? And hence my thesis that right wing people need to have more sex, and the world will be a better, happier place.
Is there any way to provide them sex? I mean, would there be a nodal agency who will provide them sex?
Uh, no, I don't think so. No, the thing is, it can't be provided. It needs to be like a form, a healthy. Basically, right wing people need to be in healthy relationships where people give each other companionship, like sexual companionship.
Hmm.
I would love to see an Indian prime minister
Hmm.
who's comfortable with sharing the podium with his or
Rajiv
her
Gandhi was.
partner.
Rajiv Gandhi was. I heard it. I heard from my parents.
Yeah, but in the recent past, whether it's
Okay. Yeah.
BJP or Congress, like Manmohan Singh had Sonia Gandhi next to him, and Modi is just this sage, this Hindu sage who just
he
shows up.
he has his obese best friend.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, we've got a terrible first lady, man, in Amit
Yeah,
Shah.
yeah, like yeah, obese.
Yeah, true, true, true.
Yeah, Amit Shah need to go for regular work. Man, I'm serious, man. I really worry about his health. I mean, jokes about.
Let's
I don't
let's do
agree on
something.
political view. I don't agree on political view, but I really fear for his health because, man, he need to cut down in on in consumption of ghee and paneer.
Let's do something. I can do something. I'll wear so I can have some beef, take a selfie, and show it to Amit Shah and make him chase me.
Yeah,
Or
it's like Shukumar Rai's poem. Remember that where the man hangs up food in front of him and he constantly chases that food in Abul
yeah, no,
Kabul.
no. So yeah, exactly. So I'm doing it for. I'm willing to participate in this exercise to make Amit Shah more healthy.
Yeah, sure. Take one for the team.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because on a genuine on a serious note, I really worry about Amit Shah as well because he is too fat. I mean, I'm not body shaming him because clearly I don't fit that task, but he need to cut down his weight seriously because he's just too obese. And considering that he is our first lady or first man in the republic, he need to put up a good show at least on his appearance wise.
Yeah, or he can just borrow some of Donald Trump's tanning versions.
Yeah, or hire Melania Trump.
Yeah, I don't know what Amit Shah's gonna do with Melania Trump.
But yeah,
Melania Trump would probably just kick him, or she kicks Donald Trump around.
yeah, I'm hearing
So
that she.
imagine what she'll do to Amit Shah. Okay, it's time to wrap up. It's been a good session.
Yeah,
Uh, and we'll cover some of these topics. We look to cover some of these topics in the next few episodes as well. So thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.
peace.